Greetings. Have you ever found yourself doing something and you realize the question, why am I doing this? If so, this may be the episode for you. Today I am contemplating habits, routines, and rituals. So if you feel like you could benefit from taking a habit inventory, then stay tuned. This idea of conscious creator is just becoming aware that you can't not be. Of course you are. Like, I know that you're a spiritual being. Your spirituality is unique to you. It's specifically yours. And you're robbing all the rest of us from having the experience of you.
Yes.
Please don't rob us. What if you are one of those one rare beings that has something very different, very special, and very unique to bring into the world? Once you become like fully embodied, fully aware, fully focused, you make a difference. Consciousness underlies everything. You are a creator. You are participating in the creation of everything that you're experiencing. What are you going to do with that? So, what is a habit, and what is a ritual, and what is a routine? Like, I was reading a spiritual text by Paul Selig this past week, and the question came up about habits. Like, he was suggesting, if you're doing something redundantly, like, ask yourself, am I doing this out of habit? And so that got my creative juices flowing and my wheels turning. So I think for the purposes of our contemplation today, we should begin with dictionary definitions. So a habit is a settled or regular tendency or practice, especially one that is hard to give up. A settled or regular tendency or practice, especially one that is hard to give up. A ritual is a series of actions or type of behavior regularly and invariably followed by someone. A series of actions or type of behavior regularly and invariably followed by someone. And finally, a routine is a sequence of actions regularly followed. A fixed program. So, I don't know about you. I'm intelligent in some ways, but in some ways I'm very naive and childlike. But the definitions of those three words sound really similar to me. So I think for the purposes of my contemplation of habits, rituals, and routines, what I would like to say is habits are often perceived to be things that are destructive or something you wish you didn't do. I mean, that's generally when someone says, I have this habit, it's usually they're saying, I need to kick this habit. Rituals often relate to spiritual practice or religious practice, but they don't necessarily have to. But I think when we hear the word ritual, many of us will associate that with our spirituality. And then routine, maybe we just need to drop that word from the conversation. So as I've been contemplating habits and rituals, it immediately occurs to me that you can be in a habit or performing a ritual, and you can be doing it with or without conscious focus. Or maybe another way to say that is you can be doing it on purpose, or you can be doing it without purpose, not deliberately, right? So in my experience, I have found myself participating in rituals and felt that I really didn't understand what the purpose of the ritual was, or why I was doing it, or what was supposed to happen as a result of it. And that didn't feel right. So it seems to me that habits can be productive or they can be destructive. Rituals can be productive or they can be not productive, depending on whether or not we're doing them on purpose, we know why we're doing them, and we're remaining consciously aware of the meaning and intention of the ritual or the habit. So, along with that, it feels right to me that we will occasionally review these things from time to time and just check in with ourselves and make sure that it still has meaning or purpose, that it's still serving us in our expansion and learning. So I want to let's ground this in some real examples. So I have a morning routine. That's a real example that I can express that I currently experience. I basically every day wake up between 4:30 and 5 a.m. And the very first thing that I usually do is consume some caffeine. And so this is an addiction. And for the purposes of our conversation today, I'm not going to address addiction. Maybe that will be a conversation for another day. But I'm addicted to caffeine, so I satiate that addiction, and it's part of my waking up process. And while I'm consuming my caffeine, I usually grab my iPad and look at my Pinterest feed or read something. If I'm looking at my Pinterest feed, especially when I've been involved in creative disciplines like architecture or photography or graphic design, that's mostly what I see across my feed. You know, the algorithms are really good and they give you more of whatever you kind of tune into. So this has been a process for me of like starting my day off with programming my visual vocabulary, and it's almost like taking my creative faculties to a good place at the start of the day. And so that process is usually about an hour. It's like I'm waking up, looking at something. Maybe I'll read some contemplations or meditations. And then I usually get up and go work out. So in the not too distant past, I would go to the gym. In the recent past, I'm working out at home with dumbbells. So I usually just one body part per day, and I pump some iron, and then I spend about 20 minutes on a stationary bike to do some cardio. And this working out part of my morning routine is very important. And it's not just my vanity that's inspiring me to do this. In my case, like one of the challenges I have faced in life is like not getting enough air, not getting enough oxygen. And I'm still like working on breathing practices, and it's something that I focus on. But by doing my morning workout, including the cardio, I'm doing a lot of breathing and I'm oxygenating my brain. So there has been a time in the past where I was not as active in this morning routine. It's almost like I got tired of it and I was bored and I was doing other things. And it took me a minute to realize how much I really needed that part of the routine. So it's like starting the day off by oxygenating my brain, because otherwise I may not be very thoughtful or productive. I can feel quite lethargic without doing that. So this is a fairly consistent practice these days, and each part of it, as I've expressed, is meaningful and purposeful. And most of the time, when I'm moving through this part of the routine, like I'm mindful and I'm conscious, I'm aware, I'm in the moment. Sometimes I wake up and I'm just not feeling any of it. And sometimes I put myself through the rhythm, even though I know like I'm not here. My imagination is up in the clouds and I'm like not there. Some days I give myself permission to say, you know what, it's just not happening today. And I'm graceful with myself in those situations. Then after my workout, I usually, I actually didn't finish talking about the routine. I usually shower, then have breakfast, and then take my little dog Buddy for a walk. And while I'm doing that, I'm usually listening to inspiring music or an audiobook or contemplation or something. Because especially during the first part of the day, my mind is super active and I want to take advantage of that potential energy. So then I get back and now I'm moving into like what I'm going to do for the day or not do for the day. So that's an everyday thing for me. And I appreciate the rhythm, the routine, the certainty of that. And I remember and I'm consciously aware of the meaning of all of those things. Without that, as I said, I can feel off kilter. And I want to kind of tie this part of the conversation over to the gene keys synthesis. And for those of you who aren't aware of the gene keys, you might want to take a look at it. But one of the sequences of a part of the gene keys that inspires self-growth and self-learning is the Venus sequence, where you really dive into your emotional patterns, your wounding, your dharma and your karma. And the purpose of moving through the Venus sequence is that you contemplate your relationships. It's a pathway towards self-expansion, growing, and learning. And one of the spheres in the Venus sequence is the SQ sphere, which is calculated by the position of the planet Venus 88 degrees or about 3 months before your birth date. And the SQ governs, in our Venus sequence, the mythology, the unconscious contours of the longing of our souls to return home. That's a quote from Richard Rudd. So contemplating the SQ is a journey of retrieval and recovery of the eternal flame of unconditional love inside each of us. And you'll see it's really beautifully and poetically placed at the center of the hologenetic profile in the gene keys synthesis. So in the SQ sphere, I have a line 1. And those of us with a first line in the SQ sphere encounter themes in life that relate to rhythm and certainty. So this is an interesting parallel for me in this contemplation. From early childhood, we are challenged by questions such as, who am I and why am I here? We are seeking this certainty and becoming aware of the rhythms of life and nature and the seasons of life. All of that's important to those of us, maybe to everyone, but to those of us with the first line, especially in the SQ. And so it's interesting for me to read that and then realize like I'm developing content for YouTube contemplations and conversations around some of these themes, even as an adult. So maybe there's an implication there that I have some maturing left to do. That'll be a conversation for another day. So a life without natural rhythm is directionless. I'm going back to some quotes from the Venus sequence from Richard Rudd. A life without natural rhythm is directionless and unable to support the process of maturing. But of course, rhythms also change, and healthy rhythms need regular changes in tempo. So again, my takeaway, or one of the big takeaways from this contemplation, is clearly to be mindful of my relationship with my rhythms, my habits, my rituals, my routines, and that I check in with myself to make sure that I'm not on autopilot, basically, and that the meaning is always still there, and that I am being aware of any potential changes in the tempo or the rhythm or the routine. So, do you have any habits, routines, rhythms, or rituals that are serving you in your journey? And or do you need to cultivate and commit to some rhythms and routines in your journey? And or are there some habits that may be up for review for you? If you are engaged in physical, emotional, or mental habits that you feel are destructive or are not serving you, that seem hard to lick, I'd like to offer some words of encouragement from my perspective. Before I do, I just want to remind us that I am specifically excluding addiction in the form of substance addiction, especially from this episode. There's a little bit different dynamic to that conversation that I may share and express from my perspective at another time. But with that disclaimer expressed, I'd like to share a few truths from my own experience relative to habits and potentially destructive habits and what to do about them. And the main suggestion that I have is that we go within. If you haven't begun the process of exploration and cultivating a relationship with your spiritual nature, perhaps this habit that you are experiencing is offering you the invitation to do so. By cultivating a relationship with your spiritual self, your higher self, you see, your higher self is more powerful than any habit. And as you develop a meditation or contemplation practice, you will likely be able to shift those destructive habits into productive opportunities for growth and learning. It can be said that everything in life, including the habits, have come to teach us something. So ask it, what have you come here to teach me? And then just be receptive to receive the answer. And try not to put prescriptions on it. Just let the answer come to you in truth. And there may be an ongoing contemplative practice that you can engage in. It might not happen right away, so be gracious with yourself. Give yourself some time to really learn from your habits. Another suggestion I have from my own experience is that it is easier to lick some habits by replacing them with different ones. I don't know if this will be a controversial suggestion, but it seems to me that one effective strategy is to distract myself from the habit that's hawing at me and trying to get my attention. I'm going to give you an example. So I have a Gemini moon. My mind is very active, and sometimes in the past, I have found myself caught up in mental and emotional thinking loops that just like repeat and begin again. And if I'm thinking about something that's productive and good and helpful, there's nothing wrong with that. My mind is powerful in helping me to accomplish some realization. But in the situations where it's something that I don't want, something that I perceive to be negative or destructive for me, it can feel like my mind is taking over and it's spiraling downward. And so in those situations, I've found that one thing that's very helpful to do is to get up and use my physical body. And I can do a number of different things: clean the house, mow the lawn, go for a walk or a jog, lift weights. Very often, along with that, I'll put my headphones in and listen to some uplifting, high vibration, usually instrumental music. And so I'm engaging my sense perceptions, my faculties on different levels when I'm moving my body, listening to something helpful and productive. And so it kind of shifts the emotional tone of the habit that was consuming me. Another thing that has been helpful is that sunshine and earthing can help. So my inner hippie is going to become apparent to you now. But if it's a sunny day, Go outside and soak up some light, or take your shoes and socks off and put your feet in the dirt, or maybe even hug a tree. Like, as you expand your consciousness, you may become more aware of the interconnectedness of you and your environment. And there is something real and magical about the exchange of energy between you and the earth and your friends, the trees. And like, I don't know if I would have said this 15 years ago, but some of this has become really true for me in my experience. So experiment with it and see if it works for you. So in conclusion, may we all be mindful and inspired to honor the rhythms, rituals, and routines that mean something to us, that are on purpose for us, and that serve us in our expansion and learning. And may we grow out of the ones, or release the ones, that may be holding us back or holding us down. I'm Jared Treadway, and this has been episode 24 of the LightCast. As always, thank you for joining me. I'll be sending you love and light until we meet again. Hey there, just wanted to say thank you for watching, and I wanted to encourage you, if you enjoyed this content, if it was at all interesting or provocative or inspiring for you, I would appreciate it if you would take a moment and just hit that like button. And if you're interested in encouraging me to continue to develop content like this, and you want to be a part of it, you can also subscribe to the channel. Both of those things will be of benefit to me and help the YouTube algorithm identify that I have something of value to offer. And of course, if you didn't think the content was interesting or useful, you also may smash that thumbs down button, and comments are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in and being a part of this. See you next time.